I'm used to debating evolution, so it's good to change it up once in a while. So let's get started then. Debate, did dinosaurs or could dinosaurs have lived with man? Now, when I look at this picture, when I think of Jurassic Park, I sometimes assume that the evolutionists think of Jurassic Park and the massive T-Rex and all the commotion and tyranny that it caused when they think of dinosaurs and living with man. Therefore, they think it to be impossible. And it's pretty common for evolutionists to make the claim that since many dinosaurs were gigantic and dangerous, they couldn't have possibly lived with humans, as people would be easy prey for them. What the evolutionists don't acknowledge, however, is that according to their own timeline, humans have lived with plenty of large, dangerous animals over thousands of years, many of which are now extinct. Look at my slides here. We see the woolly mammoth and the American mastodon, with the same size as modern elephants, as well as this extinct relative of the Komodo dragon, which was likely encountered by the early settlers of Australia. Now, these types of animals would have proved to be a significant threat to people if anybody got close to them, and yet humans were still able to work around them, and in some cases hunt them. If you acknowledge that humans coexisted with these animals, it isn't that big of a step to suggest humans lived with dinosaurs, many of which were the same size or smaller than the animals listed in these slides. Here we can see the auroch, the short-faced bear, glyptodonts. These, even according to the evolutionists, all lived with man. Evolutionists have hijacked dinosaurs and used them to teach millions of years of evolution. When you start with the Bible, dinosaurs start to make a lot of sense. We see the geologic column here. Can man and dinosaur coexist? Well, when we look to the Bible, dinosaurs and man, according to our model, did not live in the same habitat. Just like today, we see that different creatures and different animals live in different habitats. In the pre-flood world, we see certain fossils that are usually buried together, and dinosaur fossils are usually buried with gymnosperms, pines, and naked sea plants, whereas mammal fossils are usually buried with things such as flowering plants. What does this actually indicate? This indicates two different ecosystems. For example, since we're talking about dinosaurs here, although lived at the same time of man, did not necessarily live in the same areas or habitats. They were overcome by the flood at different times during the advancing of the waters, which does explain why we don't find them buried together. It is evident that as the floodwaters rose, they buried organisms in the order that they were encountered. The accepted major groups known in the fossil record are explained by their appearance according to where they lived and not when they lived. So we looked at burial, ecosystems, and habitats. Now, we can actually look to geology, which does point to a watery cataclysm. Much geologic evidence suggests rapid plate tectonics. This isn't the topic of the debate, but when we look to the layering and we look to the dinosaurs and where they're found, we can also look to the flood to confirm that. So man and dinosaur could obviously coexist, but the question is, did they? We looked at dinosaurs in the Bible. Why don't we see the word dinosaur in the Bible? I hear this question from evolutionists all the time. Well, the word dinosaur is a modern word invented in 1841. The King James Version of the Bible, on the other hand, was translated in 1611. The word dinosaur did not exist at the time the King James Bible was translated, obviously. And so it's not surprising that we would not find the word dinosaur in the Bible. We also don't find the word computer in the Bible either. Dragons. We do find the word dragon in the Bible. These giant creatures known as dinosaurs were simply called dragons. Sightings of dragons/dinosaurs have been documented and recorded throughout history. Eyewitnesses from all cultures around the earth, from England to China, have legends and stories about dragons. There are even more than 20 references to dinosaurs in the Bible. This whole controversy could easily have been avoided if they had just called dinosaur bones dragon bones. We see that the evidence that humans knew about dinosaurs before the science of paleontology was founded. How much time do I have, James?
You've got
3 minutes.
I've got about 3.5, but I started a little bit late, so.
Awesome. So we see accurate artwork depicting dinosaurs and allegedly extinct creatures is observed, proving that ancient people saw living dinosaurs. The evolutionary community is baffled and surprised when plants and animals assumed to have gone extinct the same time as the dinosaurs are suddenly found to be alive. These are known as living fossils. The coelacanth comes to mind. Here's a picture of the coelacanth. The evidence. Dinosaurs have been documented in history by eyewitnesses such as Marco Polo, Herodotus, and Alexander the Great. There exists today a multitude of cave drawings, mosaics, sculptures, and paintings of dinosaurs from ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Cambodia, Europe, Australia, all over the earth. Here's a picture here that was drawn, I believe, in Utah. This picture here, Bishop Bell's dinosaur. In the 15th century, we have Bishop Bell's tomb. We know when he died, and so we know how old this is, and this is much before dinosaur fossils have really been found. Not until the 1800s were dinosaur fossils actually found in bulk. We find carved animals in this tomb, and some of these animals, as you've seen, look exactly like dinosaurs, sauropod dinosaurs to be exact. Many of the carved animals are animals alive today, plus dinosaurs. What more proof do you need? We see this painting of the plesiosaur-like creature. The Australian Aborigines painted this painting of a creature that they believe lives in a lake that they won't go near because they're afraid of it. This painting looks exactly like a plesiosaur, which is not a true dinosaur, but had flippers and lived in the water, of course. We know there are countless legends of lake monsters and thousands of testimonies. Was everybody lying? That's what the evolutionist is going to have to. People clearly knew about dinosaurs. I just had to pick a few here, but there's tons. You can look at them yourselves. People have obviously always known about dinosaurs if they drew them. It's conclusive evidence, really. The evidence is clear. Man coexisting with dinosaurs is obvious after looking at the overwhelming amount of evidence. The evidence is staggering due to the endless artifacts, drawings, carvings, statues, mosaics, and depictions throughout history of various dinosaurs or other thought to be extinct animals. We look to the Bible, we hear of a beast called Behemoth who had a tail like a cedar tree. People who have to hold to that evolutionary worldview, they'll say things like Behemoth was obviously a hippo or an elephant. We can go through this, but obviously where the Bible says he moves his tail like a cedar, well, if you've looked at an elephant and a hippo's tail looks nothing like a cedar. For sake of time, I'll move on here. It's all based on their worldview when people say Behemoth cannot be a dinosaur. We see historical accounts, St. George killing a dragon, Beowulf, Alexander the Great. We even see it in empirical scientific evidence, soft tissue and dino bones. New scientific findings have revealed amazingly preserved dinosaur bones, which contain soft tissues, flexible blood vessels, and intact cells. Did you say that was time, James?
Nope, you got about 10 seconds.
This indicates these bones are thousands of years old and not millions. Obviously, the evolutionists have rescue devices. We can get into that if necessary. So thank you so much. I mean, we see stories all around the earth. Oakley Abembe, look at that.
Yes, there is plenty of evidence that dinosaurs lived with man and even went on Noah's Ark. All you have to do is mention the word dinosaur on Noah's Ark or dinosaurs living with man in, say, recent times will lead to scoffing from the atheists, from the evolutionists. But the fact is, this evidence of dinosaurs living with man and that the Bible's history of this universe is accurate is overwhelming. There's actual historic, scientific, and even eyewitness evidence, ample evidence for this. And the fact is that more and more evidence actually continues to be discovered, which actually proves that everything we've been taught about dinosaurs is absolutely wrong. Dinosaurs have been documented in history by eyewitnesses. A few examples that come to mind are Alexander the Great, Marco Polo, Herodotus. You can look for yourself. There exists massive amounts of cave drawings, mosaics, paintings, scriptures, sculptures of dinosaurs from ancient Egypt, Cambodia, Europe, Australia, North America, pretty much all over the earth. And in the scripture, we see the description of dinosaur-like animals: Leviathan, Behemoth. The word dragon is used over and over again. And these sculptures, mosaics, paintings, cave drawings that I talk about, you can actually go see them yourself. We even have documentation of the existence of completely fresh, non-fossilized dinosaur bones. What is unfortunate is that people have been brainwashed, and not only brainwashed, but conditioned to believe that these dinosaurs are actually prehistoric animals, beasts that lived until about 65 million years ago. But the fact is, these evolutionary scientists, they're dedicated to convincing you that dinosaurs lived long before man. Because what they have to do, they're like salesmen, evolutionary salesmen. They have to sell you the story, the fairy tale that comes right out of SpongeBob La La Land. That pine trees, whales, and dinosaurs are all related through common ancestry. So if dinosaurs were actually alive within the last few thousand years, this theory of evolution, pond scum to people evolution, becomes highly unlikely. Now, dinosaurs to begin with, they're nothing more than reptiles that continue to grow in size. And most people that I talk to, most people that you will talk to, they seem to be unaware of the fact that reptiles never stop growing in size while they're alive. For example, as humans, we know that our noses and ears never stop growing. And same with mammals and most of the animal kingdom. They grow to a certain size, then stop growing. While they do get older, they don't get any bigger. But with reptiles, as I've stated earlier, they continue to grow in size until the day they die. Let's take a tortoise that has lived over 100 years. It's known and documented that they get to be the size of a bathtub. Imagine a tortoise that could live up to 500 years. They'd be the size of a garage. Now, when we actually examine dinosaurs, and if we look to the biblical record of history, say before Noah's flood, we know that man lived to be hundreds of years old. Methuselah, for example, lived to be 969 years old. And after the flood, when the lifespan of man was decreased based on the after effects of the flood, based on genetic entropy, the accumulation of low impact, deleterious mutations, the ages of man have dropped off. Take that back to a point of, say, least genetic entropy. Imagine if these animals had the ability to live that long as well. We know today that reptiles never stop growing in size throughout their entire lifetime. Therefore, picture a Komodo dragon, picture a gecko. What are they going to look like after 500 years? Can you say dinosaur? Now, to not get into too much detail about the biblical evidence, let's look at the evidence of dinosaurs living with man in recent history. Because like I said earlier, it's overwhelming due to the countless artifacts, drawings, mosaics, carvings, depictions. You can see depictions of Brachiosaurus, plesiosaurs, pterodactyls, triceratops, T-Rex, and many, many more. The question is, for the evolutionists, if man didn't live with these creatures, how did artists throughout ancient history and in cultures all over the world happen to draw these animals, to recreate these giant beasts? Was it just all coincidence that it turns out that they look nearly identical to what we see in the books about dinosaurs in museums today? I've heard evolutionists say, well, they must have seen dinosaur skeletons back then too, and that's how they were able to recreate them and draw them. And it's not just a coincidence. They've seen the bones. But the thing is, this argument fails tremendously. And the reason why is that dinosaur skeletons, they're not just found lying on the ground intact, as if someone's going to walk by, look down, and see what that dinosaur looked like. The bones are always fragmented, they're separated, and they're embedded deep within the ground or within the rock. And most of them are missing. Occasionally, yes, you might find a piece of a single bone, say, sticking out of a rock here and there. But at the end of the day, that's pretty much all that we actually find. And if you actually think about this logically, what does logic say? That's all anyone in ancient history would have been able to find as well. And there's no way they would have been able to create that image of the entire animal, the entire dinosaur, without the entire skeleton. We know that the science of paleontology did not develop until the early 1800s. It's all rescue device after rescue device and post hoc, ad hoc explanations coming from the evolutionist side. This process of digging out and excavating dinosaur bones from, say, rock didn't begin until then. And as a consequence, the first complete skeleton of a dinosaur was not constructed until the 1800s. The word dinosaur, which everybody knows means, great or terrible lizard, it didn't exist before 1841. That's when it was coined. But that doesn't mean dinosaurs didn't exist. It just means that these giant animals, these reptiles, these creatures weren't called dinosaurs before 1841. This is what logic dictates. They were called dragons. And what do we see? Thousands of dragon legends from cultures all around the world. Dragon sightings have been documented and recorded throughout history by eyewitnesses. They've been part of all sorts of legends and cultures all around the earth, from China to England to everywhere. And as I said earlier, there's even over 20 references to dinosaurs in the Bible. But of course, if the word dinosaur wasn't coined until 1841, they were not called dinosaurs, they were called dragons, since the word didn't exist yet. This all fits perfectly within a biblical base model. So how did these people 2,000-3,000 years ago, how did they know almost exactly what dinosaurs looked like? Listen, guys, there's only two options. Either logically, they saw the dinosaurs with their own eyes, or they could have constructed the skeletons. There's not really a third logical option that won't sound ridiculous at the end of the day. So if we actually look into these explanations, and we look at, say, civilizations throughout history, to think that they actually knew exactly what dinosaurs looked like in detail by just seeing, dinosaur skeletons, at the end of the day, that's not logical. Because as I said earlier, the first skeleton was not even put together until the 1800s. And there's not as many dinosaur skeletons as you'd think. The fossil record, we can look to paleontologist Dr. Kurt Wise. He's got a PhD in geology from Harvard University. He'll tell you, this is confirmed. This is fact that only 0.0025% of the entire fossil record consists of more than a single bone of vertebrate animals. And after nearly hundreds of years, 200 years to be exact, of paleontology, we have now been able to come up with just a few fossils of large dinosaurs. And there's almost no evidence in history of previous civilizations digging and excavating bones, let alone creating entire skeletons, as some of these evolutionary apologists would have you believe. But remember, they need to hang on to that primary assumption that pond scum to people evolution is true. At best, if you want to give them something, someone in history maybe found an occasional large bone shard, say in the ground, and tell their buddies, okay, this belonged to some type of big animal. But it's not logical at all. As a matter of fact, it's illogical to believe that they could, with their imagination, guess exactly what, say, a Tyrannosaurus or a Brachiosaurus or a Triceratops would look like, or any other dinosaurs for that matter. I could go on and on and on. Plesiosaurs, for example. How would they know that these depictions were identical to what they actually look like? The ones that we see in these artworks, the cave drawings, the sculptures, the mosaics, and writings that we can go into thoroughly throughout history and from many different cultures around the world. Usually, and what it is about legends, thousands of legends, is they come from a common source. Ask yourself, Whether you're a believer, you're on the fence, or you're a critic, if these dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago before modern man evolved, and the first dinosaur skeleton was then not excavated and constructed until the early 1800s, how did human artwork throughout all of history just so perfectly manage to come out and depict several types of dinosaurs that look absolutely identical to the dinosaur depictions we see in the science books today? It's a simple answer, guys, as everything is. Start with a biblical-based model, a biblical-based assumption. What's the answer? They drew what they saw with their own eyes.